Last year, an author was canceled and forced to pull her second book from publication after she secured a 3-book deal with St. Martin's Press. Let's talk about it. My name is Taylor Rose, and welcome back to my channel where we talk about everything reading and writing. So we are talking about Colby Wilkens. Her little bio, it says that she is the USA Today bestselling author of the speculative rom-com If I Stopped Haunting You. She is Pacific Northwest born and raised, loves traveling with her partner, puzzling, baking, and curling up with a good book, a cup of tea, and her 2 cats. However, all is not as it seems. So last year, her first book, If I Stopped Haunting You, was published in October 15th, 2024. Shortly after the publication of her book, the Tribal Alliance Against Fraud came forward with evidence that Colby Wilkens' claims that she is of Cherokee and Choctaw descent are not actually true. Colby has said in multiple interviews that her great-great-grandfather fudged around with some paperwork, and therefore they cannot prove that they are actually of Cherokee descent. The Tribal Alliance, however, looked into her background and found that while there is someone who has the same name as her great-great-great-grandfather on the Cherokee registration rolls of 1898, that person has different parents and is a completely different age than her relative would have had to be at the time. So, unfortunately, there's no identifiable link between her and any of the tribes she claims to be related to. Initially, a lot of people were a little shaky on this because the Tribal Alliance Against Fraud does have some questionable history, and you might think initially like, oh, well, people get told stories about their ancestors all the time. Colby has stopped claiming to be Cherokee or Choctaw and has taken references to this off of her website. However, the bigger issue is related to her books. So her first book that came out that October, If I Stopped Haunting You, the MMC and the FMC are both of Native descent. So on the Smart Bitches Trashy Books website, they do reference a review of the book that discusses some of the background of the main characters. For example, Penelope Penn Skinner is looking to improve her sales by appearing at BookCon. Unfortunately, her most hated enemy, rival author and former hero of hers, Neil Storm, is also there. Penn feels as if her career has suffered due to her staying true blue to her culture and heritage, while Neil has, in a phrase, sold out to whiteness. It doesn't help her feelings of inauthenticity that she's white passing, biracial, and not registered with her tribe. During a panel dedicated to Indigenous horror authors, Penn lays into Neil for writing a wisecracking misogynist hero who runs around shooting arrows from a quiver strapped to his back, and for succeeding with a book title that she feels is racist. Neil demurs at this criticism. He declares that, as a fellow Indigenous writer, they should be supporting each other. Sounds kind of like Britt Andrews. She suggests to Neil that he ought to write something with real soul. The audience disapproves, so Penelope grabs her microphone and chastises them for not accepting her 2 Native characters and declares she'll write a book so good it'll erase Neil's name from the history books. She then throws a book at him, physically injuring him, and storms off. The article continues, so an allegedly Native author of a romance wherein 2 Indigenous protagonists argue about Native representation in fiction is, according to a 10 generations deep search in their ancestry, allegedly not Native at all. This article does address some of the controversy behind TAAF, who themselves say that they try to help people identify the truth, and, says that it is very common for people to be caught up in family myths. Like, that's nothing to be ashamed of, but it is your responsibility to be able to substantiate these kinds of claims, especially if you are using that identity as part of your professional life. However, no Indigenous nations or tribes have officially endorsed the work that they do. Right. And some people, like teacher Travis Hedge-Koch, have stated that the TAAF is not authorized by any tribal government, has shown itself to be racist and transphobic, as well as just generally fraudulent. AJ Eversole, a Cherokee author and journalist, did share extensive resources on Twitter and shared a link to a United Statements from the 3 Cherokee governments talking about who can identify as Cherokee. A few things they list is that only individuals recognized as citizens by the Cherokee Nation, the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, and the United Ketowa Band of Cherokee Indians should claim a Cherokee identity. So if you are not registered with them, you should not be saying that you are Cherokee or of Cherokee descent, because the Cherokee identity is actually a political identity that can only be established through documentation by one of those Cherokee governments. They go on to say that it is not an ethnic or racial identity established through self-identification. So no individual or group of people can claim this identity on the basis of genetic testing, phenotype, family stories, inherited culture, or just any other random criteria, right? So they're pretty strict on who actually qualifies. I will go ahead and link the article so you can go ahead and take a look at it. It has a lot of really good information. But because of this article, Colby has since taken down any mention of her association with these tribes. Per her own statement, they do not have the documentation to prove anything. Because of this, Colby did say that she would be taking down her second book in her 3-book deal, If I Dig You, another rom-com, which also has Native characters. This book, If I Dig You, is about 2 archaeologists and who are best friends. One flees the country to end a toxic engagement, leaving her best friend behind, who then uncovers journals talking about lost Cherokee gold. Her and her friend are kidnapped and forced to try and uncover the location of this lost gold. Obviously, they fall in love. It is billed as a friends to lovers adventure romance. It has a 3.0 on Goodreads because by October, it was already out on NetGalley as an ARC. So you can see here that they archived it on October 28th, 2024, when all of this drama went down and Colby announced she would no longer be publishing the book. It was due for publication in the following March, so March of this year, 2025. So in the wake of this controversy, Colby did release a statement on her website. I've only ever created stories that are authentic to me and my life experiences. I am not enrolled. I've never claimed to be enrolled or to represent the viewpoint of an enrolled tribal member, as reflected in my stories and statements. I've grown up with family and in a home that shared this experience, which goes back to my great-grandfather and extended family, and has been part of our culture and identity. I've always been transparent about my identity and our struggle to gather the paperwork necessary to enroll because of bad record keeping and missing and inaccurate documentation. This is not unheard of and is a difficult part of forming family histories. I'm working hard alongside my family to find more documentation, which takes time, but until I can prove my ties beyond a shadow of a doubt and in alignment with the Cherokee Nation's statement on sovereignty and identity, I will no longer be writing Native stories. My team and I have decided to pull If I Dig You from publication until further notice, and If I Stopped Haunting You will be my last Native story. Thank you for your patience as we work through this. A lot of people on Reddit weren't happy with this statement. Flimsy Peaches states, am I understanding correctly that this white woman shopped around a fake story about a great-great-great-great-great-grandparent? Yes, that is 5 greats, and it comes from a recent interview she gave on a podcast. I'm not really sure, because even the investigation by the TAAF is talking about her great-great-grandfather. So I'm not sure where she said 5 greats ever, because of course he was supposedly Cherokee and successfully parlayed that into a 3-book deal with a major publisher writing Native stories. Sickening. I'm dead tired of this trend of white writers posing as Indigenous or as other people of color in order to make money. ETA. Worth noting that this author is defending herself by saying she never claimed to be enrolled, but she described herself in her bio and in interviews as Choctaw-Cherokee, certainly knowing that most people would take that to mean she is an enrolled tribal member. True Mystic 6791 responds, this is gross and makes me want to vomit. These folks always want the benefit of being Indigenous, Black, or people of color, but then never want to experience the racism or discrimination that we dealt with every day and are never in community or in relationship with Indigenous, Black, or people of color. I hope they yank her book deal. A lot of people were really not happy about this and attributed malicious intent to Colby. In addition to a lot of debate as to Colby's intentions, Glass Castle Library shares the following. 3 or 4 years ago, I was a rep for a bookish book sleeve company with Colby. I became pretty good friends with the owner of the company during my time as a rep. Colby and another rep were also supposedly good friends with the owner. Then there was drama that I wasn't a part of and don't know exactly what happened, but when the owner posted art for a new sleeve featuring Poppy from FBAA, the other rep and Colby were upset that Poppy wasn't plus size enough. They both then took conversations they had with the owner and made them public, in which the owner said something about not making her a bigger size because she's supposed to be very active in the series, and she didn't think a bigger plus size woman would be able to do those things. The owner is also a larger plus size woman, as am I. My view of it was she took her personal experiences with life and applied it. Do I think she was wrong? Yes. Even though I probably wouldn't be able to do the physical things Poppy does throughout the series, other plus-size people can. The owner apologized. Colby and the other rep wouldn't accept the apology and continued to bash her and her business online. This was around the same time Colby started talking about having Indigenous ancestry. The owner of the company mentioned it to me, just telling me that she had met Colby's parents and they were both white, or extremely white passing, and she mentioned something about where she grew up, and just that she wasn't sure if she was actually Indigenous. That's something that if you make that claim and you're correct, everyone would be glad it happened. But if you were incorrect, people would be very, very upset with you. I only know for sure from my experience with Colby that she was not a nice person. The rep chats would have 20 or so people in them, and Colby always seemed to try and center herself in every conversation. We were encouraged to share ideas, etc., but if Colby didn't like something, it was given absolutely no further attention. And if she had an idea that others didn't like, she would be very upset and angry. At one point, the owner of the company added one of her good friends, who was also one of the staff artists, to the chat. Within 10 minutes, Colby and her were in an argument, and the artist ended up leaving. I wish I could remember what happened, lol. Over her years on Bookstagram, she made friends with several popular authors. From what I'm seeing, there are other people/authors of color who are coming forward now talking about their very negative experiences with her. Colby made a post on her Instagram addressing the accusations, only to say her second book's publishing was now on hold until she could prove that she is actually Indigenous. Nowhere in her statement did she apologize. Cool Beans 86503 comes forward to kind of give a benefit of the doubt to Colby. Okay, so I know you all mean well and are trying to defend Native Americans' heritage, but this line of thinking, natives have to prove their identity, is actually harmful. Native Americans are the only people who are required to present their pedigree in order to be believed. The BIA instituted the Certificate of Indian Blood, CIB, to document natives, but more deceptively, to eliminate them. This line of thinking supports genocide by insisting that natives only count as natives if they're enrolled. I hope that makes sense. In direct reference to the article, it was not uncommon for Native children to not know when they were born. The man with the same name who was several years older than this author's relative absolutely could have been the same person. Are we really going to trust the US government to accurately record Native American history? I will say, long story short, I was doing some genealogical research on my own family tree, and I could not find a census for an entire generation and their mother. And it turns out that they moved to a different part of town. They were in a different district. And the person who was recording things switched the names around. So, for example, if the name had been Taylor Rose, they had switched it to Rose Taylor. And they had actually gone a step farther and written Rose Tyler. However, the ages of the mother and the children still living with her were in line with the truth, as well as the children's names were still correct. A lot of historical documents at the time don't really illustrate the entire truth. So Cool Beans continues, my husband's, who is Navajo and grew up on the res, grandmother didn't know how old she was. We thought she was somewhere between 94 and 96 when she passed. She claimed to be 94, but her CIB said she was 96. She was sent to a boarding school around 3 years old. The children were supposed to be at least 5. So there's where the falsified age probably happened. My husband's uncle, oldest child of the above-mentioned grandma, is not exactly sure how old he is. He was born at home and sent to boarding school very young. He's somewhere in his late 80s or early 90s. He's a veteran and was in the military for 20 years. So if someone were to claim him as their great-great-grandfather as proof of heritage, an organization like the one in the article would find the same issues they did with the Wilkens relative. My point being, it's not uncommon. So long as this woman was not purposefully being deceptive for personal gain, she did nothing wrong and should not be persecuted. Throughout history and in current times, Native American people have had to fight tooth and nail and blood to preserve their heritage, traditions, and cultures. The societal mindset that a person has to prove their Indian blood is a colonial concept and only serves to silence Native American voices. So the OP Seconaut did respond. Hi, there's been a lot of back and forth discussion here. I also removed an edit I made where I did say dunno who TAF are in terms of their authenticity or legitimacy too. In part because of what you said above. I'm not from North America, but living in the colony known as Australia, I see the debate too and how horrible it is for Aboriginal people when it comes to proof, and that it's a nuanced discussion that needs to consider how colonialization plays a huge role in this. I further touched on something I think complements what you've said in this comment. And then they link to another comment. That said, she has removed references to being Cherokee, and I have no doubt this will be something to take a lot of time for her to work through. I'm hoping Native American writers are doing okay right now, though. I saw Danica Nava comment that she long blocked Colby on Threads. So that is a reference to a Threads chain from Danica Nava, who said, I never spoke out about Colby Wilkens after I blocked her for being an all-around awful person to me and other authors of color. I never did because she had a huge platform and would cry lateral violence and it would just give her a boost. Now her fake Native book is a bestseller. She has a huge marketing and bookseller support for Native November. She's not Native and never will be. And a bunch of people in the comments reciprocate that sentiment, saying that they were blocked or bullied by her on social media, etc. So overall, complicated situation. It doesn't seem like Colby is a very genial person. We can put it that way. After her second book was removed from publication, it's been silent. It's been silence for almost a year until just recently her third book was announced. If I Go Down with This Ship. It is not expected for publication until July of next year. However, the cover has been released. And when I first saw this cover, I immediately thought, is this Our Flag Means Death fan art? And then I looked into it more and realized, like, oh no, this is a book that's coming out. As you could probably guess from the title and the cover, this is a pirate romance. The blurb says it is a swashbuckling, high-stakes queer romance set on the high seas between a man fallen through time and the pirate captain he's following for. Almost immediately, people started calling it out. From the Mixed Up desk tagged St. Martin's Press, Colby's publisher, with the caption, "Be so fucking for real." And you can see the cover, and like scrolling by, I was like, oh, that's cute. And then you zoom in and you're like, that's Taika Waititi and Reese Darby. That's so blatant. That is so blatant. Sapphic Library posted, in case you missed it, Colby Wilkens, aka the author who lied about her identity to profit off Native stories and then was exposed for that and for being a bully, just announced a new book. So yeah, cancel culture really isn't real. Emily B. Rose writes, also, for those who don't know, this book was 3 in her 3-book deal and originally had an indigenous pirate who I guess they just changed the ethnicity of and are continuing to publish. LMAO. So poor Robin had another set of concerns. Hey, St. Martin's Press, this kind of marketing endangers fan spaces. The only reason sites like AO3 are allowed to exist is because they aren't monetized. Using a cover image that is indistinguishable from fan art of a TV show makes it more likely that the owner of the IP, in this case Warner Brothers, will decide to take action against an author or an imprint. I know that publishing sees fan space as untapped monetary potential, but these are tight-knit and important communities. You put them at risk. Let me be clear, there's a lot of published fanfic out there, like loads, and that's totally fine as long as the published work is far enough away from the original IP, i.e. 50 Shades, The Love Hypothesis, Bonds of Brass, etc. For this kind of blatant tie to IP the author doesn't own, 100% thought it was Our Flag Means Death fan art when I stumbled across it, marches boldly up to the line of credulity and basically just dares the owner to do something about it. Poor Robin continues, this form of marketing makes me really worried for the future of AO3 and fic writing in general. The whole reason it's illegal is because it's transformative and unmonetized. As a bookseller, seeing increasingly more romance covers with blatant wink nod art, I wonder at what point an IP owner is going to say, fuck that and sue, looking pointedly at marketing for the irresistible urge to fall for your enemy. And May Dexter author says, why does this look and sound like Our Flag Means Death fic? AM Wield says, apparently it is exactly that. Yeah, I think it is pretty blatant. Roland Prose also called this book out, saying, Colby Wilkens announcing a new book is such classic publishing bullshit. She claims a Native identity that isn't hers, is exposed as a fraud, her book gets canceled, and then less than a year later she announces a new book with a trad publisher. To be fair, it's the same publisher as before. I mean, I can't say what they were thinking, but it was one she was already locked into. There might be legal implications we aren't aware of. Danica Nava responded, LOL, she was in the BIPOC Slack debut channel in 2022-2023 talking about how this was a Choctaw time-traveling pirate book, so she just rewrote it to be white pirates. Emily B. Rose writes, says, yeah, the pirate he travels back in time to was inspired by Blackbeard from Our Flag Means Death and was supposed to be indigenous. So if you haven't watched Our Flag Means Death, I highly recommend it. It's super funny. It's basically Reese Darby plays an Englishman who, in his midlife crisis, decides to go become a pirate. During his attempt to be a pirate, he runs into Blackbeard, played by Taika Waititi, and they strike up a friendship. Shenanigans ensue. It's really cute. According to Wikipedia, Waititi does identify himself as a Polynesian Jew due to his Maori and his Jewish background, which does also play a part in the storyline of Our Flag Means Death. So that just kind of adds another layer to this controversy. Given the context of everything that happened with her previous books, I think it is safe to say that she did just reskin this story, but kind of just dived right back into the issue with it in the first place. And that's not even touching the fact that it is giving off very strong fan fiction-y vibes, which is just something I don't understand. Like, I guess I get it because, you know, with all that, the whole Dromini thing, like you're pulling in people who liked that ship, but at the same time, you're just leaving yourself open to problems. It would just be so easy to change hair color, hair length, height, you know, anything to make them like visually distinct from the source character. You know, obviously there are different issues when there's like cultural background involved in this, but it will be interesting to see if St. Martin's Press responds to this reawoken uproar against Colby Wilkens, or if she self will acknowledge it. So I started working on another video and I saw a post that I wanted to tack on to this one. So you can see from the Mixed Up Desk shared some bingo cards with book titles written by Indigenous authors. While I don't think Colby necessarily did anything wrong, you know, she took responsibility saying, I was told this, we have a hard time finding documentation, I won't mention it again. In the meantime, nothing wrong with that. But I do think if she had, looking at her social media, it seems like she just kind of dropped off the face of the earth after that, when she could have done something like share more information about Indigenous authors to add a little more authenticity to her apology. But I will say, you know, thinking on it, the whole situation kind of makes me laugh because it reminds me a little of myself. My biological father was apparently extremely vocal about being like 100% super Italian, but his mom had a German name and his last name wasn't Italian. Like it's really generic. So of course nobody believed him. I didn't believe him for 30 years. And then I started doing some genealogy stuff and discovered that like, oh, he wasn't lying when he said his grandpa shortened their name, but the name they shortened from wasn't even Italian itself. Like it sounds Spanish. It's used in some Spanish places. So we were like, okay, you're even weirder. But, you know, I finally went back all the way to the great-great-grandparents who immigrated from Italy, and they had shortened their name on arrival to the name that sounds Spanish. And then the name that sounds Spanish was shortened even further. So going off of my DNA results, he would have been roughly 1/3 Italian, 1/3 German, 1/3 English. So it goes. All that to say, I don't think it's unusual for people to have been told things or to believe things taught to them by their families that are ultimately untrue, but especially when it involves marginalized communities or identities, it would behoove you to do some fact checking. Well, that is all I have for you today. I will see you next time.